Fresh off his first overseas trip, President Trump not exactly getting a vote of confidence from one of America's closest allies. German Chancellor Angela Merkel says European nations must take their own fate into their own hands, adding that they can no longer completely rely on the United States. So with that one sentence, let's have a conversation. Michael Weiss is with me, CNN investigative reporter for international affairs and co-author of ISIS Inside the Army of Terror, and also with us, CNN military analyst and retired Army Lieutenant General Mark Hertling. And on this Memorial Day, I would be remiss, General Hertling, thank you so much for your service to this country. But let me begin, General Hertling, with this one line coming out of Chancellor Merkel at a beer hall. She's not the kind of woman that just speaks off the cuff. Her words take significance. Why would she say this? What's she getting at?
Brooke, well, first of all, thank you for your comments. Secondly, I'd say that having spent 12 years of my career in Germany, when I first heard this, that Chancellor Merkel had said that, it just shocked me. But as I looked more into it and found out more and talked to some folks that I know in Germany right now, it was an offhand comment at a beer hall, as you just mentioned. It wasn't a major policy speech. But having said that, it is still very disturbing. She has her own internal politics to be concerned about. They have an election in September. So she's actually countering some of the rhetoric of her main competitor, Martin Schulz, who has been asking her to step up against Trump. So I think this was a valid opportunity, but it certainly also indicates what kind of affairs took place at the G7 summit as well as at the NATO conference in Brussels, which we all saw play out on TV. They are not very happy with the Trump administration in Europe right now.
That awkward moment in NATO, right, where he's standing, he being President Trump, calling out, NATO allies for not paying their fair share, and that awkward glance on all these leaders' faces. Michael, David Frum, former speechwriter for President George W. Bush and vocal Trump critic, tweeted this. Since 1945, the supreme strategic goal in Europe of the USSR and then Russia was the severing of the U.S.-German alliance. Trump delivered. And we were all wondering, even watching, the NATO coverage last week, if, somewhere in a dark room, Vladimir Putin is just loving it and cackling. I mean, What do you make of those words?
Sort of the unofficial slogan of NATO since its inception was keep America in, the Russians out, and Germany down. Now it seems to be keep Germany in, Russia out, and America out to lunch, because under this presidency, this American leadership is suffering an interregnum. America will not undergird this post-war security compact. That's the messaging that the Germans, the French, even the British to some extent are getting. Unlike General Hertling, I'm less inclined to downplay offhand remarks that German politicians make at beer halls. I do think this represents a sea change, not just in Germany, but also in France. Look at what Macron also said.
That was intentional, the white-knuckled handshake.
The white-knuckled, not only that, but comparing Donald Trump, the President of the United States, to two world leaders, Vladimir Putin and Tayyip Erdogan, two authoritarian and increasingly dangerous world leaders. This is a signal from the continent to America. Look, we love you. We hope someday you'll come to your senses and you'll come back. But for right now, we literally cannot afford, in our security and perhaps even in sort of the geostrategic sort of chess game that is world politics, we cannot afford to rely on you because you're too volatile, you're too reckless, and frankly, we don't know what the hell this guy is thinking and what he's going to do.
Yeah, and Brooke, if I may, I got to say, Michael and I aren't that too far apart on this. It wasn't a policy speech, but it's still very damning. And I agree with him completely on this. Again, things are not going well in Europe right now. They are seeing us as they don't know what to do with the United States in terms of relationship. There was a lot bigger fish to fry other than the 2% GDP payment that Mr. Trump emphasized, which frankly he doesn't understand, and the European countries that are part of NATO do understand what that 2% means. And there were a whole lot of other things to discuss. The strategy for Afghanistan, the strategy of terror, Russian expansionism, what to do next in Ukraine, forces on the continent. All of those things were much more important to talk about in a very changing world. And Mr. Trump tended to insult the allies during several conferences.
You can see it on their faces. Let me ask you, Michael, now moving away from that and onto the Manchester